I've had a lot of bad days over the 24 years of starting a company and growing it to, we're the biggest boutique hotelier in the U.S., in California, and the second biggest in the U.S. now. But I've had a lot of good days too. What I'm going to talk about today is what I learned during the last downturn when I had a lot of bad days, and what I learned about culture, and how I reacquainted myself with one of the most famous theories of psychology and used that theory of psychology to help evolve our culture. I think that actually each of us in our work can actually distill our relationship with our work down to one of three potential words. You either have a job, a career, or a calling. You're going to see a lot of pyramids today. That's because of my interest in Abe Maslow. But this is, I think, true of most organizations. Most people have a job, a handful of people have a career, and if you want to get it right, you actually try to create an organization that has people who have a calling. I was taking a flight from Austin to Dallas in November of 2008. And if you remember in 2008, it's hard to think about it now, but in the first half of 2008, we had a robust worldwide economy. You remember that? That was not that long ago. And you knew that because oil prices spiked. And when oil prices spiked, jet fuel prices spiked. And guess what? All the airlines in the world, almost all of them, started charging for all kinds of things that they didn't used to charge for. Except Southwest. Southwest held to their guns and decided not to charge for first bag, second bag, et cetera, et cetera. There was even an airline in Europe called Ryanair that was going to start charging for the bathrooms. Pay toilets on airlines. Captive audience. So I was on this flight and I saw Gary Kelly handing out peanuts as he walked down the aisle, just like Herb used to do. I asked him a very simple question. I said, why are you not charging for bags like everybody else? Because by November of 2008, pretty much everybody's doing it. And I said, is it just because the Southwest customers would revolt and would not like it? And he says, no. And he pointed at the flight attendants. And he said something that was really interesting that's sort of appropriate for this. He said, why do you think we're so successful? And I said, well, a few different reasons. And he said, and I said culture was one of them. And he said, and it's because of these guys. And he pointed at them and he said, we have more people at Southwest Airlines as flight attendants living their calling than does United Airlines. And I agreed. I said, San Francisco's a United hub. I agree with that completely. And so what I think is true of great companies and great cultures is they somehow move their employees up this pyramid from job to career to calling. One of the fallacies of management and leadership today, less true 30 years ago, is that what's most valuable in our world today tends to be the intangible. It's not necessarily the tangible. 30 years ago, it might have been the tangible, but today more and more what's valuable, certainly high tech and intellectual property and culture and creativity and innovation and reputation and loyalty. These are all things that don't show up on a balance sheet. They are not tangible. They are intangibles. And more, the intangibles in our lives are what are important. But what we're taught in business school, I'm not going to be at business school. I went to Stanford Business School. But what we're taught too often is that you manage what you can measure. And generally, what you can measure is the tangible stuff in life. It is much more difficult to measure the intangible stuff. And therefore, we get very caught up as leaders focusing on the bottom of the pyramid and doing wage compensation, salary compensation surveys, and thinking that if we compensate better, we will have happier employees. There's some truth to that, but generally speaking, in the long run, the number one reason people leave their job is not because of money. That's fourth place. It's the fourth most likely reason a person leaves their job in America. Number one is their boss. People join a company, as Marcus Buckingham says, people join a company and they leave their boss. And I can tell you as a leader, if I'm leading a collection of people who are internally motivated, as opposed to having to barter things with them through money and recognition, it's a much easier job to be a leader. So getting a workplace to a place where employees have a sense of meaning in what they do and in what the organization does is all about what culture is about. Culture is creating an environment where people actually can live their calling and feel a sense of meaning and transformation and self-actualization around what they do in their work. It's a holistic model. And the fact is, culture is the pump that drives the heart. Culture is what allows the employee and the customer. That flight attendant on Southwest Airlines, Oh yeah, I didn't give the punchline of what Gary Kelly said. Gary Kelly said the reason we didn't actually start charging for bags is because he pointed at the flight attendants and he said to me, have you ever noticed that our flight attendants are happier than the ones on United? And I said, yes. And he said, they live their calling. And he said, how do you think those flight attendants are feeling right now with all of these customers now dragging their bags onto the plane? Because guess what? That's what we did as the customers. We said, well, if you're going to start charging me $50 or $25 a bag, I'm going to figure out a way to get my bags on the plane with me. And it made the job of the flight attendant harder. And guess what? Flight attendants on most airlines today are not in the business of customer service. They're in the business of baggage handling. Right? That's what they're spending all their time doing. I mean, it's a little bit better now because they've figured out a few more things. But bottom line is, what Gary Kelly said is the culture of our company is more important than us making $500 million. And that's the number that analysts have said that Southwest Airlines is leaving on the table in terms of actual fee income. It's more important because at the end of the day, the culture is what drives the model. Thank you. Questions?